Hello, I'm Robert, fact-checking to help scared people. And I'm getting so many messages and people posting in the group and so on, scared that Putin is going to drop nukes on NATO. This is not going to happen. There's no way that he's going to do this. And this thing about him being on heightened alert level, that never made any sense. If you think about it, then why would you go on a heightened alert level? This means a heightened alert level would mean that his missiles are all prepped and ready to launch very quickly. So they would load them up with fuel and make sure that they're just ready to be launched within minutes. And why do you need a very fast response to an economic sanction? It makes absolutely no possible sense. Totally illogical. And the strange thing, illogical thing about a deterrent, a nuclear deterrent, is that a deterrent never works if you actually use it. A nuclear deterrent is one that is only useful as a threat. It's never useful militarily. It never makes your situation better. So you threaten, and then you basically hope that your enemy will believe that you will be so illogical as to use the nukes, which is never a sensible thing to do. And so it never at any point makes any sense, even if you're losing, and even if the thing you're trying to deter has happened, it still makes no sense to use your nukes because it'll only make your situation worse. So the idea of putting your nukes on heightened level alert, if he wanted to deter economic sanctions, and then the EU did sanction him, which they already have, and he hasn't done anything, and he didn't need a heightened level of alert, because if he did, he would have responded within minutes of them putting on the sanctions, which he obviously didn't, because that would be insane. And then he would say, well, drop the sanctions or I'll nuke you. No, he wouldn't just nuke them, that is never going to help. And then just hope that they believe him. And if they don't believe him, it still makes no sense to use them. It never makes any sense to actually use nuclear weapons. And then people worry, oh, but what if Putin has gone mad? Well, I don't actually think he has gone mad. So you've got the difference between completely out of your mind, where, for instance, you might walk out of a top-story window in a skyscraper thinking you can fly, or you might you just kind of reason in totally illogical ways, and think things are going to happen that won't, and so on. And if anyone went mad, they can't use the nukes. The nukes we have, the Russian is even more safe than the US nukes in this respect. So Putin can't launch a nuke by himself. Putin has to order a general. A general can't launch a nuke by himself, because a general could go mad too. A general has to order 3 people. And those 3 people, they all have psych evaluation at regular intervals to make sure they don't go mad. And then it's set up so they have to physically insert keys in 3 different places before the nuke will fire. So there's no way for one person to launch a nuke. They can't even if they were to steal the keys from the other 2 people, it would still be useless because they couldn't put them in. They just physically can't do it. And then the whole thing is to be carefully kept under. So it would need, even if 2 people go insane, even if Putin goes insane, the general goes insane, and 2 of the people launching the nukes go insane, so long as one of the people who actually physically launched the nuke retains their sanity, then they're not going to launch the nukes. And if the general says nuke Finland, because we've been sanctioned with economic sanctions, if Putin said to the general, we've been sanctioned and the ruble is in free fall, so we've got to nuke Finland. And as I said there, the defense minister, and this is the actual person he would be talking to, General Sergei Shoigu, or however you say it, then whatever he might say with it out of facade, he might say, okay, you try to placate him, and so you say, okay, I'll do that, I'll get on the phone. You say, oh, the phone isn't working, something's gone wrong. But meanwhile, his mind would be racing, and he'd be saying, what can I do? Where's my pistol? Where's the straitjacket? How can I somehow indicate to someone that we need help here, because the president has gone insane? And that's what he'd be thinking. And he'd be trying to keep. If there were other people in the room, he might be kind of gesturing to them behind his back, saying, come on. He'd be trying to indicate to people around him to do something about this mad president. And the President Putin's own inner circle, then they wouldn't cooperate with such an insane request. And that would include, he may well have hold on them, he may have threatened their families or something, but whoever makes those threats wouldn't agree with this request either. And then the oligarchs, they would be thinking about how can they've got billions of dollars, they could find a top grade assassin and pay him $1 billion to assassinate Putin, or they could hire a dozen of them to all try and do it at once, or some kind of apparent accident and make it happen. So there's no way that this is going to happen. There's no way that Russia is going to nuke. And I don't believe, but I don't think Putin has gone insane. What I think has happened is that Putin has, he's throughout his life, he's done these special ops. And he's kind of famous for his special ops, where he sends a small number of people, a minimal number of people, to achieve the objective. And he's been very successful over and over again. He's never had a failure. And so this, in his mind, is not a special op. And he believes, or he believed at the start of it, and he may be slowly starting to doubt, or wonder if he got it right, but he believes that the Ukrainian government is a corrupt one, like his, and more so he's sort of seeing himself in the Ukrainian government. And he doesn't believe that there really was a popular vote, probably, and that he thinks it must have all been rigged. He's not listening to his spies who are telling him if any of them give me and they do have excellent spies, so they probably do have accurate information. He's just not listening to it. And he expected the Russians to just be welcomed with open arms by the oppressed Ukrainians, and this isn't happening. But from the way he's acting, I think he's still expecting this to happen. So if he really wanted to, if he was, because capturing Zelensky, even if he would capture and kill Zelensky, he would be a war hero. He would reach legendary status because he's been so brave in the battle so far, and people would then follow whoever came after him with even more. We've had this legendary hero who led our country and stopped the Russians, and we're going to continue in his name after he's been killed. So there's no way. And then Zelensky, if you ask, why is Zelensky defending his country in this way? Why didn't he just go away with his family? Well, Zelensky has sent his family to safety, to a safe area of Ukraine. He is not disclosing where they are because they are number 2 on the enemy's hit list. And he, with his rest of his countrymen, they are defending Ukraine against against someone who's destroying all their values, they've very hard-won democracy, and they risk sliding back to what they remember as terrible times, where people can arbitrarily be detained and executed and things like that. And many of the people, many prominent people in Ukraine would probably end up in prison or executed if the Russians succeeded, and it would be they just don't want to go back to that. And Ukrainians, they have, like in their national anthem, they have in their national anthem to lay down their lives to protect their country. It's actually in the first verse of their national anthem. They sing that every time they sing their national anthem. So they have an ethos of defending their country, and they have always often had against several invaders in the past. they've been invaded many times recently by the Germans, by the Poles, and by the Russians, and they've all repelled them all, and they'll repel the Russians again. So that's like the Ukrainian spirit. And then bear in mind that it's soldiers who are dying for the most part. It's about 400 civilians have died. That is roughly equivalent in 4 days, so about 100 a day. That's roughly equivalent to the deaths from road traffic in a month. So it is high levels of civilian casualties, but it's fighting for what they, and it's like in the United Kingdom, we stood up against the Nazis, and it was it's very much in the same way that they're standing up against the Russians. We stood up for our values and all the things that were important to us, and so in my case, I'm a pacifist. I wouldn't be involved in battle, but if I was in Ukraine, the one thing a pacifist could do is join the Red Cross or the doctors and nurses and the people who are helping them on the battlefield, so that it's just as dangerous, but you don't actually have a gun in your hand. Many Quakers joined the Red Cross in World War II and did that. So there will be people there, both the people who are willing to kill others and also ones who are not, but who are there, who are tending the injured, doing whatever they can, and maybe risking their life just as much, but not actually killing anyone else. So that's what's going on in Ukraine right now. Now, Ukraine is just this. I've lived through much worse, and anyone who's my age, and you may not even know it, but the Yugoslav wars in the 1990s were in Europe, and of course it's been much worse in other parts of the world, but I'm talking about in Europe, so like in Syria and so on. But there's been much worse than this in Europe in the 1990s in the Yugoslav wars. When vast numbers of civilians died, the weapons were much less accurate back then, and also there was much less, they didn't have the same ethics during the Yugoslav war. And there is no way that Putin is going to, I know they have committed war crimes. So the reason that happened in the Yugoslav wars in the 1990s, but here in the United Kingdom and in most of the world, we had peace. And nobody was killed, no bombs fell on us, nothing happened to us at all. And indeed, most people went through the 1990s, they were barely aware of the Yugoslav wars. You might have seen the occasional news item. It wasn't like today. So if we didn't have the internet, and if we had the same level of news as the 1990s, you wouldn't even be very aware that this was going on. You'd hardly know that it was happening. And it's only because of the internet. You would get an occasional news item about it every week or so, every few days. There'd be another news item about what's happened, and there would have been a news item for the start of the invasion, and a few days later you'd have heard that they're attacking Kiev, and that would be about it. Maybe there'd be a 10-20 minute item in the news every day, and you only had the news on TV sort of once, or you probably only watch it once a day, and that would be all you'd know about it. And so it's not really a worse war than the Yugoslav wars in the 1990s, it's just that we've got the internet. It's actually much less in terms of casualties and in terms of the things that are going on. And then there's no way that Putin's going to attack NATO. Absolutely not going to happen. You are not personally at risk. And there's no way that he's going to use nukes against Ukraine. I know people have talked about that, but I don't know. You get pundits on the TV sort of, saying all sorts of bizarre things, and then you need to look around for the ones who are more reliable, know what they're talking about, and the ones who are just not. So you get this kind of, because they're on TV, and then they get asked questions and they answer things that they don't even know anything about, just because they're on TV and then in the glory of the fame, and they sort of have an increased sense of their own knowledge and self-importance because they're on TV, and then they say rubbish. So you do need to watch out for that. People who are experts but not expert in their thing, they're being asked questions about. So they're expert in something else, and then they waffle on and say things that they're not expert about. So you need to watch out for that and make sure that what they're talking about is something they're actually expert on. And there's no way that Russia is going to use nukes against Ukraine. So there's no way they're going to. Again, if he was to order his defense minister to drop nukes on civilians, then this we no longer have the even like the Vietnam War. We don't have that anymore. It's just not done in modern warfare. I know they have done some things against that are against the basic human rights, like pretending to be Ukrainians and then killing Ukrainians. That's just not permitted under international law. That's a war crime. So that they have done minor war crimes already, but this would be a major war crime, and with the general ordering it, and he'd be basically the equivalent to Nuremberg trials once it's all over of some sort, and so he'd know that he'd refuse the order, and then there's also the way that the close connection between Ukraine and Russia. So it wouldn't be a war crime to drop a tactical nuke, which is a very small nuke, on an army camp and kill very large numbers of soldiers, but it would be to drop it on a city, and depending on the context in which it's being done, but certainly if they were doing it as an invasion to kind of shotgun all this city or something, and killing 1 million people, and then also the Russians and Ukrainians are very close. We see these kind of friendly encounters, like the talking to each other, like the driver would stop and offer to give a Russian tank driver a tour back to Russia. I don't know if you saw that clip. So but there's a lot of camaraderie between them, and a lot of people in Russia know people in Ukraine, and vice versa. Indeed, there's something like 2 million Ukrainians live in Russia, and the tens of millions of Russians that live in Ukraine, ethnic Russians, and they have their relatives in each other's countries and so on. So if Putin was to kill 1 million Ukrainians, then there'd probably be several million Russians who know about it immediately, and because it's one of their close relatives, a friend who's been killed by this nuclear bomb. There's no way he could hide it, and that would definitely be the end of his career as well. But and the whole defense, the whole command line, all the way down to generals and the officers and everyone who's involved in the thing. It'd be a great shame for them all. There's no way that's going to happen. And so then, what else? Talk about. The Russians are going to lose this. There's no doubt about it. They're not going to win this. By the best sources I find, this was a good. Where can I find this analysis? I'll just have to. I meant to bring up the. So I'll bring up the positive things to end this, but I'm just going to. Right, I'll go back there and I'll find. I didn't bring that up for some reason. I just want to bring up about the why Ukraine is going to lose, and so what's happening right now is that there is peace talks going on, but there's no way. Basically, it's like someone negotiating and holding a gun to your head, and saying, "Okay, now we can have some peace talks because I've got a gun to your head, and we can now agree to something. We can have some peace talks and come to some kind of agreement about dispute while I hold the gun to the head." Even if the person with the gun to the head said it, "Oh, okay, I agree. I'm going to give you my everything that I've got, and or I'm going to become your slave for the rest of my life or something." But as soon as the gun is removed, they'll be doing they're not going to be beholden to whatever they promised to do, because it was done under gunpoint. So there's no way that Ukraine it's no way that this situation is going to really lead to, very unlikely at least, to any kind of agreement, unless of course the Russians say, "Oh, we're going to retreat." If that's on the tables, and they promise to retreat and say, so if Putin is sensible, he might actually have an offer to retreat in response for Ukraine doing something, but if he's asking Ukraine to demilitarize just so that he can take over the country, then obviously Ukraine's not going to do that, and that's basically what he's been saying so far. That's what they have to do, and Putin is very vulnerable. They haven't yet, last time I checked, they haven't yet managed to get even one major city. So, do I have the map here somewhere? There's a, they're there near Kiev. There's a big major city up there. I think they've got more area than that, something like that. There's a big major city there, something like Chechen it's called. And that's behind the enemy lines on the main route from Belarus to Kiev that is still held by the Ukrainians. So they have major cities behind their front lines that are in enemy hands, from which from which the enemy can mount offensives against them. And they have, I think last I heard they had one of the major airports in Ukraine was under their control. But they only have the control of the airports for a few hours, and then Ukrainians get them control back again. So they don't have control of the airspace over Ukraine because of the Stinger missiles and the drones and the other things. They haven't managed to degrade the Ukrainians' anti-aircraft capability significantly. They just don't have control of the airspace. They are in a very, very vulnerable position, and Putin now has hundreds of tanks lined up on the streets, just one behind each other along a street, and lots of roads. They're not coming across the countryside. They haven't managed to get control of the countryside properly. They just got tanks driving down the streets, and one behind another. They're sitting ducks. They're extremely vulnerable to drones and these anti-tank weapons if the other people manage to get close enough to fire them. And they have these long-range artillery that the Ukrainians still have, with a range of tens of miles. And so Russia it's really, they can expect huge numbers of deaths. They probably have been lost, according to Ukrainians, they've lost 1,000 Russian soldiers a day, more than that. This may well be correct. And they're probably going to use another few thousand Russian soldiers tonight if they do this big thing tonight. They do their big push, then they're not going to get Kiev. They're not going to be able to secure Kiev. They don't have enough soldiers to keep in control 3 million people. They may be sending all these tanks just in an attempt to capture Zelensky, but that won't, as I said, that won't achieve anything for them. And so Zelensky says the next 24 hours is the most important in the battle, but the Russians aren't going to win this, even if they temporarily occupy Kiev by the end of tonight. And there are not going to be many civilian deaths, because the civilians will all be living in the underground shelters. They went out, they got enough food, they'll all be back with plenty of food, plenty of water. The underground in Kiev is actually designed to resist a nuclear bomb. So they actually designed the underground. It's not, even the metro in London would be kind of very safe, but this is especially designed to be bomb shelters. They're dual purpose because this is former Ukraine, formerly part of the USSR, and it's got bomb shelters everywhere as part of the Cold War legacy, and the Ukrainians have built on that and reinforced them and put them back into service and made more of them. So the Kiev population, the entire population, is in bomb shelters, so they are safe. And it's like in the Blitz in World War II, when the sirens went off and people went into bomb shelters and the bombs went up and the buildings were destroyed, but most people were not hurt during the Blitz. There were deaths, people didn't get to the bomb shelter in time, so this is a very similar situation for a different reason, because during the World War II, then there wasn't the same ethics as there is today, and Hitler would have, Hitler's bombs would have killed civilians, but indiscriminately. That's basically what they were doing in the Blitz. But with Kiev, actually they will be trying to preserve as much as possible the actual buildings of Kiev. You don't want to destroy the buildings, and they'll be doing street-to-street fighting. So you're not going to come out at the end of tonight with a flattened Kiev with all the monuments and all the apartments kind of flattened to the ground. That's not their objective. So with all these tanks, their objective would be to drive through the streets and find Zelensky and try to get control of Kiev, but very, very vulnerable, driving through streets, and in any of the houses on either side, someone could have one of the javelin, or it's not just the javelin. The Ukrainians have lots of anti-tank weapons of their own. It's just the javelins are especially powerful ones, especially good ones. So it would be extremely vulnerable if they're driving through Kiev with these tanks. And then, of course, once the tanks are destroyed, they'll block the roads, and the other tanks won't be able to keep going. I don't know what their strategy can possibly be, unless they're just standing with their tanks outside Kiev and then shelling it, and then people going ahead. So anyway, this analysis, interesting analysis, it's why Putin's invasion is likely to fail. It's apparently it's similar to a Blitzkrieg, which is, so I'm going to go on to some positive things in a bit. I just want to I'll explain this very quickly, and then I'll go on to the other, all the positive stuff, and how to ground yourself and so on. So the idea of a Blitzkrieg is that you send 3 echelons, apparently. And the first echelon is basically what Putin has done. It goes very, very fast into the country, and it's way, way ahead, and it's gone too fast to be able to really occupy the territory it's travelled over. And that's basically what Putin has done. So he hasn't occupied even the regions that are shown as being Russian on the map. They're not really occupied. They're just travelled over and somewhat subdued, but not. There's no way that they have enough troops there to keep them like that, because the Ukrainians are fighting back. So he sent and he hasn't managed to capture much of the country, even with the first echelon of his Blitzkrieg, if it was a Blitzkrieg. And he just doesn't have the troops for the second and third echelon. They're not there. And this analysis says that it would have taken a lot of preparation. He would have had to train these troops for a Blitzkrieg, and the soldiers don't even know why they're there. They haven't been trained to do a Blitzkrieg. And so he'd have had to have 2 other echelons. They have to be kept near the battleground, so they need to be fed. So it's a huge logistic thing to get not 200,000, maybe 600,000, but it doesn't actually give a number of soldiers all there waiting to go in 3 waves. And he hasn't done that. And you can't improvise one suddenly. It takes a long time to build up all those troops to do the second and third wave. So he can't they're just not there. The people to complete the invasion of Ukraine are just not there. So he can't occupy Ukraine with the troops he has. And that was the conclusion of, although they didn't go into this analysis of why, that was the conclusion of the Ukrainian Center of Defense Strategies. They said that Putin just doesn't have the soldiers available to occupy Ukraine. So there's no way that he can keep it occupied. He's going to lose this. Eventually he's going to lose this. At least the best sources I can find say that he's going to lose this. So he said he's not going to occupy Ukraine. In actuality, he can't occupy Ukraine. So what he has done is a very big special operation where he expects to be like Crimea, where he wouldn't need very many people. It would be quickly over. He's captured Zelensky, he's installed a puppet government, and that's it all done. And instead, he's meeting ferocious resistance, which his spies would have told him would happen, but he just hasn't believed their reports. That's most likely how it happened. And he's and that by the end of tonight, then the Russian troops, expect many of them to have died in the battle. They will not have achieved much at all. Their morale will be absolutely appalling after that. Ukrainian morale will be very high, because there's no way they're going to actually capture Kiev. Remember, they've been trying to capture Kharkiv. They've been trying even to capture whatever that one, the one behind the back line. They haven't even got that one yet. And yet they're trying to capture Kiev. They're not going to do it. It's extremely unlikely that they capture Kiev at the end of this. It doesn't seem possible. And most likely they don't manage to capture Zelensky, although he is at quite high risk of being assassinated tonight. But it's most likely they can't do that either. That may be their main ambition, to assassinate Zelensky, but that's not going to win the war for them. That's going to just make the opponents even more pressed up. So that's basically what's happening tonight. And there's no risk for us here. There's no risk. There's really quite low risk for the civilians in Kiev. There's extremely high risk for the Russians who are attacking Kiev. There's extremely high risk for the Ukrainian defenders who are in Kiev. So sadly, likely thousands on either side are going to die if the battle goes ahead. But there's not going to be that many civilians going to die. There are some civilians, probably not very mobile, can't get out of their homes, and they would be in the best place that they can be during the, and it would be a scary time for them. They'd probably go to the basement as far away from the windows as possible and be as safe as they possibly can be. There'll be some civilians likely die tonight, but it'd be mainly soldiers. And I don't expect them to get Kiev tonight. It'd be extremely unlikely. I can't say absolutely won't, but it's extremely unlikely. So now on to the positive things. So what if I find these things? What we could do? So first of all, no. What anything else I need to say? So yeah, I explained why Zelensky is doing it. He's doing it for his people, for everything that they stand for. He's and then the Russian soldiers, for Putin, because he thinks it's an easy thing. No, that's about the south side. That's not what I'm looking for. Right. So now, what else do I need to look for? And so very likely. I talked about the palace coup. Just talk about that briefly. That very likely, there's people already talking about the possibility of a palace coup, because what he has done has been it's just been so bad for Russia, and he's achieved nothing. He's achieved absolutely nothing sensible, and there's certainly his inner circle. So he might even be the head of the palace coup, as it were, because he can't be elected as president because he's an ethnic minority. Very unlikely he's going to be elected as president. So that's why Putin trusts him. But there's a point. He may well have pushed him too far with this. So he might well be the kind of centre. He'd know lots of people. He's been in the central administration through previous presidents, and for a long time he's very experienced in palace intrigue. And so if there is a coup, he may well be the person who is kind of orchestrating it behind the scenes, and carefully sounding out other people. He'd know everyone very well, and but we wouldn't know about it until suddenly it happens. It would be and even Putin wouldn't know about it, or he'd stop it. So if there's a palace coup going on, then we won't know about it, but it might happen. And otherwise, Putin. So on the other hand, what Putin could do is bear in mind, I don't think he's insane. I don't think he's lost his. Insane is a very broad term. I mean, I don't think he's lost the ability to reason and be logical, like rational, ruthless. So, I think that Putin is out for this. Is that yes? I forgot to say this bit, so I'll just say this bit first. So the out for Putin is that Putin has told the Russian people that the Ukrainians are attacking Russia, and although many of them have access to the internet, some of them are so believe the Russian propaganda, even though they have access to the internet, they think that somehow it's all faked. They don't believe the videos, they don't believe the stories that they see on the internet. And so even those with internet access, a fair number of them, some obviously do believe it, the ones who are doing the protests and so on, but probably including many who have got relatives in Ukraine who actually believe what the relatives are telling them, but depending on their connection with their relatives. But there was a lady on the TV yesterday, and her mother is in Chechen, this one, or whatever, I don't know what quite the word is, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it, but the city I was telling you about, that's behind the front line, on the line between Belarus and Kiev, one of the most vulnerable cities, and that hasn't been taken, and they're being constantly bombarded. Every night they get bombarded, and they actually, recently during the day, every couple of hours during the day, then they get bombarded by bombs. And so her mother is spending not just the night, but even the day in a bomb shelter. And she said, Olga, forget her second name, she said that she's the only one in her mother's extended family who's trying to help her. So she's on her phone with her mother every day and telling her, stay in your basement because lots of bomb alerts today and advice like that. And apparently, most of her mother's relatives are in Belarus, and they don't believe that her mother is being bombarded. They think it's all fake. So they've just, the mother and daughter have just not been able to talk to the relatives. They've just had to stop talking to the relatives in Belarus because her mother is in life of danger and being bombed by the Russians, and her Belarusian relatives don't believe this is even happening. So imagine what that's like. In your own family, your own relatives don't believe that this war is actually happening. So even when your mother is in danger. So this is how strong we don't actually realize how strong propaganda can be in Russia. So even they've got the internet. They've even got a relative who's in London, who's got full access to the internet, can tell them everything that's happening, listen to all the interviews and everything. They just don't believe them. So it's like repetition over and over again can be a very powerful effect on your mind. And these people are watching the TV news, which is saying over and over again that Ukraine is attacking Russia. She said that her relatives believe that Ukraine is attacking Russia. And so that's what Putin's people believe, that Ukraine is attacking Russia, that Ukraine is attacking the eastern Ukraine and is also attacking Russia, and that Russia is fighting back and is meant to repel this attack. And so all that Ukraine, and they believe that there have been no Russian deaths, and and none of the Russian equipment has been lost yet. No tanks have been damaged, no planes have been harmed in any way. That's what the Russian people believe. And so so an easy out for Putin is to say to his people that kind of way to ramp out of it is to consolidate his wins. So he has certainly won, for instance, the water supply near the Crimea, which was one of his main aims. But one of the things that's been a bone of contention for a long time, that Ukraine controls the water supply for the Crimea, which is a kind of peninsula which doesn't have much water of its own. So he has managed to get that, to secure that for sure. Some places along, and he may have extended the separatist region, but I don't think he has, because it seems to be contained. So he hasn't really managed to capture much of the Donbass region. I don't think he has. He's managed to capture bits about Chernobyl and Kharkiv, but that's not securely captured either. So mainly an area about the Crimea. He could tell them that he's managed to expand the area about Crimea to include the water supply, and then consolidate his gains, then try to gain little bits here and there elsewhere that he can present as a victory. And then he'll tell his people there's been a glorious battle. Ukraine has started to try to defeat Russia. We stopped them, and we actually gained a bit of territory in Ukraine in the process. So that is his out. And then he can get a treaty with Russia, with the United States. And he can say we've deterred the United States aggression, we've managed to stop them from sanctioning us, because if he manages to get the sanctions lifted, which would be quite hard to do after what he's done. But the Ukrainians will be pushing for much more. They want reparations for the war. They want Ukraine to contribute to rebuilding Ukraine, Russia to contribute to rebuilding Ukraine, because Russia is entirely responsible for what happened. So we'll just have to see what happens in the negotiations. Putin has a very weak hand now, and Zelensky has a very strong hand. And it's going to be quite difficult for Putin, and that's why the actual palace coup is probably more likely, even for a rational, ruthless Putin. It's going to be very difficult for him to find an out-ramp from this. And well, it's hard to see. We'll see what happens. Anyway, so now let's go on to what you can do by way of being you have to be not the analysis. So let's see what we've got here. What we can do about, not that one. It's this one. That's about if you're right. Okay, let's since this up. So many of you have been saying that you're feeling suicidal. So just ground yourself in this. That look around, and unless you're in Ukraine, if you look around, and like I'm here, I've got a peaceful stream running past my room. It's very peaceful here where I live. But wherever you live, You just look around, and you'll see that the no tanks driving up and down your street. You don't hear the sounds of artillery at night. You don't have enemy planes flying over. There's nobody shooting down planes in your skies. There aren't any saboteurs kind of going through your city trying to saboteur your infrastructure and trying to destroy things. There's nobody who's trying to assassinate your Boris Johnson if I'm in the UK, or in Biden in the United States. None of this is happening to us. I see, like in the Yugoslav wars, where nothing was happening to us in the UK. And there's no risk of anything happening to us. NATO is extremely strong. Conventionally, NATO is far stronger than Russia. The NATO Air Force can easily outmatch the Russian. And then economic sanctions are hitting Russia very hard. The sanctions, they've stopped the Russian central bank from being able to trade with other banks. And then also this SWIFT thing. The combination of those two means that the Russian central bank can't control the value of the ruble anymore. So the ruble is likely just a plummet in value because people are losing confidence in it. And it dropped 40% overnight. Whether it will recover or whether it will continue dropping, that means someone in Russia who has, say, $10,000 equivalent in rubles, it'll suddenly only be worth $4,000. And it won't make any difference when they're trading with other Russians, except that a lot of Russians are trying to convert their rubles into dollars. And the kind of end result of this might well be that Russia is no longer able to use the ruble as a currency anymore. They have to use dollars or something like that, because its currency is no longer stable, or peg the ruble to the dollar. And imagine how embarrassing that will be for Putin. And so the end isn't going to be that the Russian economy is completely gone, but they would probably have to peg it in some way to the dollar. And that something like that would be this likely end result. Very embarrassing, very humiliating for Putin. They have to start using the American dollar in Russia instead of the ruble. And so that's what's happening now on the economy. And why was I talking about that? So nothing. I'm sorry, I've lost track of what I was saying there. Why I was talking about that, but so just look around where you are. There's nothing actually happening. There's no bombs, nothing happening. Now, even if you were in Ukraine, and maybe some of you have relatives in Ukraine, then if they're civilians, then, or maybe some of you even are in Ukraine, then if you are in Ukraine, then you're in a war situation. Again, you don't feel suicidal in a war situation. If you are at war, then you are focused on staying alive, not on trying to kill yourself. At least most people respond to a war situation like that, and try to help other people. And so, if you are in Ukraine, follow whatever is the advice, whatever your authorities are saying. Go to your shelter. Only go out when it's safe. And if you are a soldier, then you know you've taken on the risk, that you've got the risk of dying because you're doing it because it's worth it, but it's worthwhile what you're doing. So just have a clear mind of what risk you're taking and why, and then and then again, if you are in an underground bomb shelter in Kiev, even with the sounds of bombs coming down, in terms of your actual physical situation, it's not possible at all really that they're going to actually kill people in the bomb shelters. Although it'd be quite scary hearing the bombs, then you're safe down there. It's not really much different from for kids who don't know what's going on, and they just happen to spend a night in an unfamiliar place, and they're running around and playing with their toys and things. And actually, they aren't at any risk of dying because they're in this bomb shelter. So it's just really that you've had to camp out in a bomb shelter overnight. And my parents' generation, then my father was, I can't remember the dates, but in my parents' generation during the Blitz, then they would have been in bomb shelters during the Blitz. think my mother was in the Land Army, but was quite a way out of. I don't think he was in London, or in one of the places being bombed. My sister is the family historian, but anyway, so she knows all about this. I'm sorry, rather forgetful about it, but anyway, so in the Blitz we were like that in the United Kingdom. We've been through much worse times, and we're not in that so if you're in Ukraine, you know what to do, and your risk is very low as a civilian if you are careful. And if you're able to get to a bomb shelter, it's higher if you are immobile and for some reason can't get to a bomb shelter. If you are outside Ukraine, you're not going to die tonight. There's no way that a stray missile fired at Kiev can hit London. It just can't happen. They don't have the range. These missiles have a range of maybe a few miles, not thousands of miles. So you are not at risk. And you know, if a drone went off course, and I think we run out of fuel before it got here, and anyway, it'd be shot down instantly as soon as they crossed the border into a NATO country, because they've got very good air defences. So there's absolutely no way that you're going to be hit by anything tonight. And but if you're feeling suicidal, then this is just like if you've got appendicitis or something. If you risk of killing yourself, then this is a medical emergency. So don't be ashamed by it. It happens to people. It's just like it's like being ashamed of an appendicitis, burst appendix, saying, "Oh, I don't want to go to the doctor because I'm just ashamed that this pain in my might mean that I burst an appendix, and what a shameful thing to happen." It's not like that. So if you feel suicidal, this is something that happens to people's minds, especially at times of stress like this. So if you're suicidal, then absolutely, what would happen if you dial 999 in the UK or 911 in the US, then you can, it's an emergency, you might have to be picked up from your home and taken to the hospital, or you can drive there yourself to emergency department. You get a psych evaluation, and then if they psychological evaluation as to whether you really are suicidal and what your risk is and what the level of risk is, and if they think that your risk is very high, that you're going to kill yourself, then they have the option of holding you. So remember that if you are suicidal, you go to hospital, there's a possibility that they will evaluate and say that you need to be detained for 2 to 3 days while they observe you. And so they would then remove everything from your room that you could use to kill yourself. And they would observe you. They would, of course, counsel you, do the best they can. The more likely is that they would evaluate you and say that you're not at serious immediate risk of killing yourself. We give you support in the community. So it depends on the level of how suicidal you are. And then they will, you'll be talking to someone, and then so it'll be a big, it's a big nuisance. It's a gap in your life, but it's saving your life. So if you really do have a serious risk of killing yourself over this, then do remember that it's a medical emergency and you can get help. So that's that. And then there's lots of ways you can de-stress yourself. Try doing things. So that's another of my debunks. See if I can find it there. It's the further one down. It wasn't that one. It's another one. I talked about all these things you can do. Now where is it? Trying to find it. Oh no, it's up. I can't find it. Just a minute. No, I can't find it. Oh yes, so the two of them. There's a high alert. So which one am I on? This one, that one, and that one. I'm not sure. I might need. So I'm planning to do another debunk based on some of this, and I've got a checkpoint of things that I was going to go through, but I haven't got it on the. I don't want that anymore. I finished it. I just wanted to get something up kind of quite quick. So yeah, that's the. Can we go? Yeah, that one. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that was that one. Oh, yes, yes, yes. So first of all, if there was a nuclear bomb dropped on anything, then dropped anywhere, it's just like a conventional explosion. It's really very little different from being shelled in a conventional way. So anyone who's still scared of that, it's very little difference, so long as you know how to protect yourself from the fallout. Then you duck and cover just as for any other bomb because of the shock wave, and then you go to a shelter, and you basically, the thing is to make sure that you don't drink any water that's been contaminated by fallout. You remove any clothes that were contaminated with fallout. The fallout is dust that starts falling from the air about 15 minutes after nuclear explosion. So that is the dangerous stuff. You've got 15 minutes to get to a shelter. So anything will shelter you from stuff falling from above, and then ideally with intact windows still, if you can find those, kind of board up the windows if you've got time before, but in case it kind of blows into your, especially if it's a bit windy or something, and keep it out. And that's basically what you do, and then you won't get radiation sickness, and so you'll be fine. And then just stay indoors, and you can go for 2 to 3 days without even drinking water. So don't worry, and you can go for weeks without eating, unless you're diabetic, which could cause more problems. So just stay indoors. Don't go out for anything for 24 hours, at least 24 hours. And the rescuers will be there by then. Your people in helicopters sort of shouting down, giving you instructions, or whatever it is that happens. So, and the biggest humanitarian relief ever. This is the Ukrainian national flowers, a symbol of fertility and unity. And so, I didn't talk about this right, so now. So, yes, do then positive things. Yeah, so here we are. Yeah, so that's the section, I think. Yeah, the world's gone through much darker times, so think about that, think about the past. His invasion is not encouraging the far right, it's the opposite. Indeed, with the Macron's election coming up in France, then it's very likely that he was very statesmanlike in the way he dealt with this. Although he wasn't successful in deterring Putin, he put his very best into it, and this is going to be quite impressive from after a presidency with quite a lot of mixed results in terms of the way it's accepted by the French people. But they are this is really boosting his chance of success without him even campaigning. And the far right are in a very embarrassing situation that they have been backing Putin. So this is really going to seriously impact on Le Pen's chance of winning the presidency, and she's very, very rank outsider now. And so the invasion is it's not going to encourage Russia to do this again in the future, because it's been such a fiasco, they just got it so wrong. And it's not likely to encourage adventurism and countries to invade each other in the future. And NATO has shown how strong it is. And Russia can't do anything about these economic sanctions, because Russia's a very weak economy. Russia has economy is roughly equivalent. It's less than Italy. It's much less than I think it's about, is it New York or something? I can't remember. It's nothing like, it's half the GDP of California. It's sort of a middle road state, not even the biggest of these US state economies. It's between Spain and Italy, and yet it's got more than double the size of Spain. It's got several times the size of the nearest US state in population, but the same GDP. So it's a bit like any threats that Russia does, a bit like, say, Italy saying, I'm not going to trade with the rest of the world. You see what you can do about that. And then they would just say, well, okay, we'll trade with Spain, and we'll trade with the United States, we'll trade with Australia, we'll trade with Germany. So there's not much that Russia can do by way of reprisals to the economic sanctions. The main affected are Germany. Germany can deal with the gas by using coal for a while, just for a few months. So it's still got its coal-fired power stations. It just needs to start them up and increase the amount of coal it burns, and it can then substitute, just burn more coal, and it can substitute for and it can also use nuclear. Or I'm not quite sure the details, but one of the sources I was looking at said that Germany can deal with the shortfalls by using coal. So what that does is that means that it's not generating electricity using gas anymore, much less use of gas for its electricity. This then leaves much more gas for use for other things. So Germany gets lots of gas from other countries, just some of it comes from Russia. So it has to deal with the shortfall from Russia. And that is even have an economic exception for the gas, so I'm not even sure that's going to happen. But if it does, then or if Russia tries to hold back the gas, then that's what Germany can do with that. And then it's very rapidly building liquid natural gas, and Russia is losing a lot of its purchasing of its clout against Germany, because Germany is making sure that Russia can't harm it in the future. So it's very damaging to Russia's any chance of leverage of Russia against the world. And in terms of food, just don't worry about it. We have huge stocks of food. We have enough grain. So Russia is a big grain exporter. So is Ukraine. It only impacts a little bit on the Ukrainian exports. It's just part of the Ukrainian exports, mainly of corn. They are not going to be much impacted by this, because they're not going to destroy the stockpiles they have. They're going to continue exporting. When Russia took over Crimea, it made no difference to Crimea is a big breadbasket of Ukraine. And it made no difference to the exports of Crimea at all. And if Russia tries to stop trading grain as a way of getting, that won't do anything, because it's not enough of even though it's a very important exporter of some grains, there are huge stockpiles of grains throughout the world. So there's not much that Russia can do, and it would lose out majorly by trying to stop exporting grains, and it's not likely that this war will do much to the exports of grains anyway, because they'll just continue doing them, and farmers can continue exporting through a war. So don't worry about that. Apart from the very worst cases when they can't move their tractors around or something, or whatever it is that they do. So don't worry about that. There's not a food issue. There's not an issue. It's going to nothing to world food issues. It's very sad. It mainly impacted from the food. If there's some interruption, would be countries in sub-Saharan Africa and the Middle East. They're most impacted if there's a disruption in food exports from Russia and Ukraine. But there probably won't be much of a disruption. And if they faced issues, then there are lots of emergency things. Lots of emergency response funds to make sure to help deal with famines. So the world's gone through far darker times. This is a minor conflict of one Eastern European state. It's very important for Ukraine. It's not going to do much for the rest of the world. It's consolidated NATO together. It's pretty much made it impossible for Russia to do this again. There's no way that a future US-Russian president would do this again after seeing what has happened. So then the positive things. So just look at all the positive things that we've achieved. This is nothing like the Cold War. We have far more connection with Russia than we have ever had. We have far less. So I talked about the propaganda in Russia, but there's so many chinks in it because of the social media. Whereas during the Cold War, it was total. The Russian citizens had no way of accessing what people were saying in other countries. We had all these leaders of various countries going back and forth and talking to Putin, and you're back in the Cold War, and that sort of thing wasn't going on. You wouldn't have had a dozen meetings of leaders talking to the leaders to Khrushchev or something or whatever in a few weeks, and people just didn't know what was happening behind the Iron Curtain. And as I said, we didn't have the news. Even the things that were known and was hardly broadcast. You only had you only had half an hour a day for your news programs, 2 news programs for half an hour each or something like that. Or I think one was 20 minutes for half an hour, something like that. and that was all the news you got. And then what you got in the paper that you read in the morning, and many people, you wouldn't read the entire paper. Most people just didn't think about the news much. You read it for a few minutes in the morning, and if you got the daily paper, many people didn't even get the daily paper. You would watch the news in the evening, and you wouldn't maybe pay a lot of attention to it, and that was it. That was all the news you got. And then even people who were more connected, people knew very, very little about the Russians and what they were thinking. And the Russians knew very, very little about the rest of the world. That was the Cold War. We can't ever go back to that. It's never going to happen again because the world is too connected. So so we had glasnost, and that's irreversible because of the internet and everything that happened since then. Russia could conceivably, without glasnost, maybe it could have gone like North Korea and set up an intranet instead of an internet, so there's no way for Russians to connect to the rest of the world. But having gone through glasnost and having had the internet connected to the rest of the world like it has now, there's no way it can go back and copy North Korea. So there's no way of going back. There's no way of going back to. We will never go back to a Cold War situation again. So when people say it's a new Cold War, it isn't. It's nothing like a Cold War. Not even remotely. It can never be like a Cold War. Never that lack of knowledge. Never that kind of, you don't know. They could be planning to drop nukes on us. We have absolutely nothing about how the leaders of Russia are thinking even. Just no idea what their plans were, what their ideas were, what they were thinking, what their discussions were. You couldn't interview them. You didn't have people on television interviewing the Russian president and asking them questions. So that was the Cold War. This is not the Cold War. There's nothing like it. And there's nothing like the risk of, I don't care what the doomsday clock says. It's nothing like the Cold War level of risk for nuclear war. Nothing, not even remotely like that. We literally didn't know, and we were prepared and we knew what to do. And yet I'm now 67 and no, there hasn't been any nuclear war, no bombs landed on the United Kingdom, lived through the Cold War, we're going to live through this. I mean, there's extremely no reason to expect any nuclear bombs to start falling on us. So now what else was going to go? So yes, and these are all the positive things, the sustainability goals. So if you look back to the 1970s, and I think it was the big famine in Ethiopia, and we saw these people on television with their legs and arms all sort of turned up to little sticks, and their bodies, their stomachs swelling and so on, tragic pictures on television. And that doesn't happen anymore, not to that extent, because first of all, there's Live Aid and all the outpouring of the food that went from Live Aid and the relief, but that only happened after the famine started. So that was a response from the public after you saw the television pictures, and people realised this is not enough, because if this happens, if we just react to famines, they'll keep on happening, and then every year we'll have more famines, and then we react to them, and then we save some of the lives, then they happen again. So they set up what is now $1 billion a year fund, the CER Rapid Response Fund, which stops famines before they happen. Indeed, very early on, when there's a crop failure, right back early then they're already working on it because they got $1 billion fund, emergency fund, to deal with it, to deal with the world famines. So we don't get those famines anymore. We do get malnutrition, we do still get some famines, but never like that. There's always emergency rations available that can get to them pretty quickly if a famine starts developing. And it's really only when there's a war zone and impossible to get the supplies out to them. And that's the main situation which we still have. We still have malnourishment. We have plenty of people who can't afford to get enough food for their children. We don't have these mass famines anymore. So that's one positive thing that's already happened. We've got the internet, we've got widespread literacy, we've got much better health throughout the world. And the life expectancy going up 10 years where I live, 20 years in other countries in the weaker economies. So many positive things are happening, and we do have the possibility of reaching zero hunger by 2030 if we really come together and achieve it, and clean water. And so then look around at yourself. And if you're like I am in the United Kingdom, then we have already achieved all that. If you go back to the 19th century, we hadn't achieved all that. We didn't have clean water for everyone. we didn't have many people malnourished. We had the we didn't have relief for poor people. They if you read like the Dickens stories and like the poor people there and the people who only had gruel, all you had if you were a very poor person, you couldn't afford to feed yourself. All you had was a bowl of porridge every morning. That was it. You weren't healthy. You didn't get vitamins. You didn't get vegetables. You just got porridge, day after day after day of porridge. So in the United Kingdom, then oats, I think, oat-based porridge. So in the United Kingdom, we don't have that anymore. That's the 19th century. That's not that long ago. My grandmother's generation. It's her when she was a kid. Then she was brought up in Victorian times. Then she was just coming out of that era. And then we also had the South African apartheid, and we've had all the votes and votes for women and votes for all the votes equal, not just for the wealthy but votes for the poor people as well, because it used to be only the wealthy people who used to be able to vote, and only wealthy men. It used to be in the United Kingdom, not a couple of centuries ago. Only wealthy men were able to vote, and now everyone can, if you're old enough. And then we had the end of apartheid in South Africa. So this is the direction we're going, and we're going more and more that way. And what is happening in Russia is just going to push us even faster in that direction. So, just look at what you've got around you, and just value the things that we don't value. Like value that you're living in a place. You're not living in a war zone. You don't have bombs falling on your house. You don't have to go to cower in a basement. You've got lots, unless any of you listening to this are in very weak economies where things are much more difficult, then you have access to clean drinking water. You most likely, unless you're in one of the countries with very strict water issues like a desert area, you most likely have enough water for a shower or bath whenever you want. You have abundant water basically, and then you have plenty of food. Even if you're very poor, you've still got access to the food banks, which is in some countries. So it's a bit shameful that it has to be like that, but that's the situation in some countries. But we don't have people dying of malnutrition in the United Kingdom. So you've got excellent healthcare. So just try looking around, just seeing all the positive things about your life, things you don't even think about. You've got fresh air. So because of the Clean Air Acts, so if you were living in London in the early 20th century, then you've got these regular pea supers, and the very worst ones, and people were dying of the really noxious air, very horrible noxious air, which is actually poisonous. The air is now clean. Even if you're in a city, even if you maybe don't like the traffic fumes very much, but you've still got clean air. Far better than many Asian cities indeed, which are some of them still having to make quite a lot of progress still on that. So again, you just value having clean air to breathe and fresh water to drink that isn't poisonous, and also value the food standards. So back in Victorian times, your food, you didn't know what was in them. Now we know that our food is safe. We know that our water is safe. We know our medicine is safe. We know we've got regulators for our medicine. We don't have to rely on quack doctors anymore. So think about all these positive things about how positive how fortunate your life is, and then try and think wishing that the people in Ukraine, and then your freedom of speech, that you can say whatever you like to anyone, within reason, apart from hate speech and things like that, that you can walk around, that you don't need to worry about being arrested for having views different from the people around you, and or you can write anything you like on Facebook, and you don't need to worry that someone's going to be coming up to your flat and sort of arresting you for, and you could go and demonstrate. So you could go and demonstrate in solidarity with Ukraine, and nobody's going to arrest you like they do in Russia. So those are other things that you can value, that you, even if you maybe not like your government very much, but most countries, as we saw with all the arrests and all the protests in support of Ukraine, in most countries, and it's absolutely permitted to go out and march and protest and shout and carry slogans. So that is a major freedom that you have. And so all these things then also wish for that for the Ukrainians. So try turning it around. Instead of looking at what's in Ukraine and think, oh, that's scary, I feel suicidal, I'm afraid that's going to happen to you. Be much more confident, because that's not going to happen to us. And then wish for that for Ukraine. And then if there's anything you can do to help the Ukrainians. So, for instance, on one of my, down here, I've got, well, I mean, a very little thing that I did easily do. You can put a Ukrainian flag on your profile photo. And I've got this Stand with Ukraine. I just did that for my Twitter feed. I've yet got to add that bit onto my Facebook feed. That's something I can do immediately after I've done this, indeed. An extra little bit that adds to the impact, because it then makes clear to everyone what the flag is for. So that doesn't mean that you're standing for Ukraine against Russia, as it were, but you are standing against Russia in the sense of this senseless war that even the soldiers are dying from. So you're basically showing solidarity for. I'm basically standing with Ukraine and the poor Russian soldiers that are caught up in a war, and they don't even. The Russian soldiers will believe the same propaganda. They think they're there to liberate people, and that there's an oppressive regime that they're trying to depose. So do bear in mind that the Russian soldiers, they have no idea what they're doing, and so and that's indeed a major risk for the Russians, that by deploying the soldiers there, then they're getting exposed by these various encounters we've seen on TV of Ukrainian civilians coming up to the Russians and saying, "What are you doing there? We didn't invite you there." And they expected to get Ukrainians coming up to them and saying, "Oh great, you're here, you're liberating us," and they're not getting that. So the Russian soldiers are being exposed every day to the situation that really they aren't liberators. So this is very difficult for the Russian soldiers. They must have a lot of difficulty coming to terms with it. So imagine yourself being a Russian soldier who thinks you're doing something good, and then you find that you're in this war that you don't understand. You haven't even been told until suddenly someone said, "Go marching off towards Kiev," and you don't know why you're doing it. You don't know why there's some change of ideas, and they haven't explained why. And then you're told you're liberating oppressors and you're not. And then you get these bombs falling down and you're killing and destroying your tanks. You may be one of your colleagues has been one of the first people who went off, where they flew off in planes and helicopters to land in that airstrip near Kiev, and the helicopter was shot down before even any battle or anything. They were all killed in the plane. So lots of the Russian soldiers had died like that, and others, just driving down the road in a tank, and then suddenly they're dead. And so it's really very rough for the Russian soldiers, and I think it's pretty unethical what the Russian commanders have done to the Russian soldiers, their own side as well. So you can feel that as well, and you feel sympathy for everyone involved here. And then a thing that Buddhists do that can be quite a little bit hard to get your mind around, but it may be useful to try thinking like this. So a Buddhist idea, which I think is quite generally useful for everyone in all religions and non-religions, is Buddhists believe that we are all basically good and basically kind, and that things like what Putin is doing comes out of confusion. Buddhists think that confusion is the basic thing that causes problems, that they don't understand what is good, best for their own, for themselves indeed, that they think they're being very wise and rational, but they're actually confused themselves, and it'd be much wiser and much more rational to be kind and generous and beneficial to others, and your own mind then becomes very peaceful and open. And it doesn't matter how much wealth you have. You actually have much more wealth if you don't have trying to cling to the wealth, which happens with a very open and kind mind. It's not about kind of throwing things away or pushing stuff away from you. That is just as clinging as trying to grab onto stuff. So trying to push stuff away and just give things away senselessly for no purpose is not getting rid of attachment at all. You end up losing the things that you had, and you still got the attachment, and so that's even worse. That's called hairy attachment in Buddhism. But so dropping this idea having a much more open state of mind, where you have a different, much freer approach to everything, and then it becomes like the entire world is like your treasury, as it were, because things can come up from other people and from the world itself, that not because you own them, but because they just came up spontaneously by themselves, and they come up spontaneously in yourself, and then in every situation you're in, there are all the resources to deal with that situation wherever you are. So so in that sense, you're actually much wealthier in a way if you aren't so focused on trying to accumulate and aren't so focused on trying to control other people, because they can spontaneously do the things that are actually best. So the actual wise mind, kind mind, compassionate mind, and that's the best way of approaching the world. And so you then look at someone like Putin, you think, how sad that he hasn't managed to access this basic wisdom, basic groundedness, and basic common sense. And so Buddhists think of this as being very basic to everyone. And so you have the idea of bodhisattva. Bodhisattva is someone who has a wish to help all beings. That's bodhisattva wish. It doesn't mean someone who's able to fly or some kind of celestial being. Just basic sane wish. That is, according to Mahayana Buddhists, that is the sanest way to be. So it's not about being something special or unusual. It's basic groundedness of everyone. And if you can somehow manage to connect to your own basic sanity, you're going to be a bodhisattva in this sense. So it starts off as just a wish to help others, but gradually you realise that that's the basic essence of everyone. And so it's not that you become a bodhisattva, but that you see everyone as a bodhisattva, if you really do follow that path. So Putin, he himself, has that within him, to the kindness, to be kind and compassionate to all beings. And very sadly, he hasn't managed to connect to it. So that's the extremely sad thing about someone like Putin. So he's ending up killing lots of people, which is extremely harmful for his own mind. Putin, very closed in, very fragile, and very paranoid, and you can see very clearly how it's impacting on him, and how he's making bad decisions. And so from the Buddhist point of view, you look at someone like Putin, you feel very sad for him. So it's possible to be compassionate for everyone, for all beings, and you think in terms of what in future he can be. So in future he can become a Buddha, or however you think of it in your religion. He can be as compassionate and wise as anyone, and he has that possibility, and kindness and gentleness and peace of mind. He hasn't got peace of mind, he's got nowhere near peace of mind. So, but this is so incredibly superficial that so it's not even like a wisp, not even like a cloud, not even like a mirage. It's almost not there at all. The all this hate and all this paranoia and all this confusion that is driving him. Then, if you can connect to your basic ground, your basic being, then one analogy is like little ripples on the sea, on a very, very deep sea. It's just it's almost nothing. Indeed, even that is too substantial as to what the difference is between Putin's state of mind and the connecting to his basic groundedness of kindness and wisdom and openness to everything. So try to think like that all this is going on, but there's this basic kindness in everyone. So that depends. You have different ways of thinking about it depending on your religion, but try to develop kindness to everyone as extended as far as you can. That makes it much easier to cope with a situation like this, because it's for as long as you're thinking of these hateful people and I'm opposed to them, then that hateful feeling in yourself, like if you say I hate Putin or something, then that is disturbing your own mind and making it much harder for you to cope with the situation that we're in. So try to relate to other things. Basic kindness. you probably might be very difficult to feel compassionate towards Putin in the situation. You can make a little try and see if you can a little bit, but basically focus in other directions. Try to be basic kindness, even simple things like give someone a glass of water, take your dog for a walk and the dog enjoys it, help your kids to get dressed or go to school or whatever. Then these basic simple things where you're helping other people and you help your neighbour in some way or other. In our group, go online, help scared people in the group. And these basic acts of kindness, then just relate to that. Kindness is basic and is substantial and central to us. And then there's this passage from the Dalai Lama. When we face some problem, if there's a way to work on it, then make effort. So I say, and I've got the donation line there. If you have some money to spare, you can donate to the British Red Cross, which has a Ukraine crisis possibility, and you're putting a flag on any little thing you can do. And don't think that because it's little, that it's too little. There's no. The Buddhists think that even the smallest thing, if you've done it with the mind of kindness and openness, then it's vast in its effect, even though you don't see how vast it is. And so, when you face some problem, if there's a way to work on it, then make the effort and do whatever you can. And so, if you're in Ukraine and helping to other people in the shelter and so on, and if you are in Poland, say, then you might be able to house some of the refugees in your house. Some people will be able to, depending on your situation and if it's possible. So if when you face some problem, if there's a way to work on it, then make effort. And if the situation is such that there's no way to overcome it, then there's no use in much worry. So just let the worry fall away, because it's not going to actually help anyone to get worried. And most of this worrying is thoughts. It's not something that's actually happening to us. So if you look and ground it, as saying, we're a very peaceful situation. The world as a whole is extremely peaceful at present. It's been a rare moment of great peace in the world, which we're heading more and more towards more and more peace, in the sense of very little in the way of warfare, and when there are wars, they're small wars and very few people die. And so the more wars, because there are more countries, but the wars tend to be small and not last for very long, and not so many people die. And there's very reduced tendency of the great powers to fight each other. So we're in a time of great peace, and if you look at where it's headed since the 19th century, human rights improved, and appreciation of others, and different points of view and different understanding and so on. It's really, look where it's headed. What's important is where it's headed, and it's the same also with your own personal life. So if your mind is very chaotic and confused, then look, you can't instantly become calm and get over your anxiety instantly. That never happens with anyone. So especially if you've been anxious for some weeks, as many of us have during the Ukraine war. So don't expect too much of yourself, but look at the direction, and if you're moving towards being more peaceful, less anxious, more kindness, and you're going to get spikes up again, but look at the direction you're going in your personal life, and look at the direction that the world is going as a whole. That really, it's been incredible how we've come together on climate change and so many issues, and on COVID. People look at all the things we are not doing well, but there's so many things we have done well. We've done excellent. We've done things very, very well with the COVID pandemic. So, and it's heading towards a world where we're going to have vaccines available in even the weaker economies everywhere by 2023. I mean, and we are eliminating other diseases as the pandemic progresses. So they've almost eliminated guinea worm disease, which was a horrible disease, and there were only 15 cases last year in the entire world. We've almost eliminated polio. We've eliminated malaria from many countries. One country, every year, another country gets added to the list, or other countries a couple of countries got added to the list. Several countries got added to the list last year. we're going to end up with a world without malaria eventually, and then the various other diseases that we're getting rid of. So, and I expect us to get rid of COVID eventually, because we have such excellent vaccines coming along the way. I expect by 2030 that there'll be very few infectious diseases, and we'll probably have largely controlled flu as well, which is one of the most difficult infectious diseases to deal with because it's so mutable and it's so evasive. It's the most evasive of all the diseases. And but eventually we likely have controlled flu, and we've also got much better treatment of it now than, say, a century ago, and that will improve as we get towards 2030. So we're going through, you always have blips, and this war in Ukraine is a blip, a negative blip, but look at where it's going long term, and it really is looking immensely positive. So I've got some, there's the Ukrainian crisis appeal, they're my resources, breathe in and out, 7 tips, and you're connecting with basic kindness in your life, then that's a very positive. Just look around at the kindness of others and be appreciative of the kindness of others and the generosity of others, which happens all the time in tiny ways. It's so common and so pervasive in our lives, we don't notice it. So it's not just about developing kindness in yourself, it's about appreciating the kindness of others and letting them be generous and not blocking the generosity of others. And and then be appreciative and then value it, and then that is valuable for them too. And just notice how every day you get these little moments of kindness all pervading your life. And Ukraine fills the news because bad things are newsworthy. The reason that Ukraine even hits the news at all is because of this grounding of basic kindness throughout our life. We expect kindness. It's so common that it's absolutely basic and normal for humans. So when we see these news stories, they hit the news because they are not kind. So it really hits the news when someone is not kind. It almost never hits the news when someone is kind. So then we focus all our attention on this person as being not kind in some way or another. And then it fills our mind. But so to counteract that, try to reconnect to the basic kindness all around you all the time. And then this is just something that it's going to pass. And I expect it to, they're going to lose, Russia's going to lose tonight. I can't see them winning Kiev. They might assassinate Zelensky, which would be extremely sad. But most likely they don't. And then we'll move on. Then from tomorrow, the Russians will be extremely demoralized after having put all their best effort at attacking Kiev and failing, or even if they partially capture it, but they haven't fully. So I don't know, it's impossible to say, because it just depends on how long it takes for Russians to realize what a mistake they've made. So I don't think it's going to be going on for months. I'd be surprised if it goes on for weeks. So, but we just have to see what's happened. But for as long as it lasts, then just connect your basic kindness, disconnect a little bit from the internet. You don't need to be checking every hour. You don't need to be waking up in the middle of the night and checking. Nothing's going to happen to you overnight. I check frequently because of the debunking, but because I don't get scared by it at all. I've never once been scared by the Ukraine crisis. Not even slightly. I know there's no risk in the United Kingdom. Even if I was in the Crimea, then I'd be doing whatever needed to be done. So I check frequently because I'm not scared. But if you get scared, then reduce the amount that you check. It isn't really. You can find out. Remember that back when I was a kid, then this same story. Or even when I was a young adult, when I was in my 20s and so on. And in 1990s, how old would I have been? I'd been 40s. I'd been in my 40s. Then, even back then, you only saw the news every few days. Probably if you were very caught up in other things like I was, then you wouldn't watch the news every night. You might do, some people religiously watch the news every night, but many people will only watch it from time to time. They'd glance at the papers if they did get them, and they wouldn't read them all the way through. They just read the front page, and then they get on with their life. And that is would be a sensible way of approaching this. Basically, think of it like you're in the 1990s, and you when you bring up the internet, that's like you're reading the paper. You spend about 5-10 minutes on the front page, and you maybe read a little bit in depth of the other stories. Then you get about with your life, and then in the evening, you might have 20 minutes of news, and then that's it. And then you get on with your life, and you're doing other things. And that is a perfectly reasonable level. And then, if you want to reduce it even more, then just check the news every couple of days or something. So it's absolutely okay to do that. I don't feel that you have to be up to date with the latest battles in Ukraine or whatever. So anyway, hopefully this has helped some of you to be a little bit calmer, a little bit more peaceful, and do remember that the emergency lines are there if you need them, and talk to others around you, and try to find others to help you when you're scared and so on. And as to messaging other people in the group, then it's as to ringing up other people in the group, then do a text first and ask them, is it okay to message me? I get lots of video calls which are mistakes. People press the wrong button, and so I just automatically hang up. And so if you try to ring someone up, they probably would expect it's just a mistake. If you feel you need to talk to someone in the group and one of the debunkers, then first text them and ask them if it's okay to video them, because it depends on their circumstances, whether it is okay and whether they can find the time, and whether there may be a particular time they could talk to you. And some people have very full lives, and it's difficult for them even to find 5-10 minutes and so on. So sound out a little bit as to what the situation is, and whether you can talk to them. And then send them a text saying, I'd like to talk. Let's talk now. And then if they say back, or you make some arrangement with them, and you'll find out when they're sleeping, when they're awake, and when you're likely to be able to contact them or whatever. And then some of the debunkers will be able to help you by video chat. I sometimes talk to people by video chat if they're really scared. So I'm available. Though I prefer to do it by text, because I can answer many more people in the same time. I'm always short of help with PMs. But if you're really scared, then I can give you a video chat or an audio only chat. If audio, it doesn't need to be video. You don't need to share the video, but you can talk to me if you want. And so I do that from time to time. But do text me first if you do need help during this crisis. Then you text me first. Otherwise, I will just assume that it is a mistake and automatically decline it. And do be considerate for the other people in the group. If and the debunkers and tagging them and so on. You respect whatever their wishes are. They need to set personal boundaries. They may have difficulty dealing with the crisis themselves. They may have to set boundaries in one way or another, and they have a life to lead. And very welcome if anyone watching this wants to join the group and help with the debunking, and also scared people are very welcome in our group, the Facebook group, Doomsday Debunked. I'll upload this to my YouTube channel, and so you can click and subscribe to the channel as well. So, okay, that's it. I'll stop the recording. Yeah, it has recorded. When I look up to the right like that, it's because that's where my button is to start and stop recording. So I'm just going to I'll stop the recording. I'll upload it, and hopefully this helps some of you.